tape from the mountains of West Virginia.
Are you curious about the unknown, the unexplainable? Do you find yourself intrigued by the mysterious and paranormal side of our world? Join us on an adventure into the world of inexplicable discoveries and investigations that may someday give us a final answer as to what may be behind the veil of reality. Then it's time to turn your pods up, because we're live to tape from the mountains of West Virginia. It's time once again for Let's Find Out with co-host Diego. The universe is waiting for you.
Live to tape from the mountains of West Virginia, it's another episode of Let's Find Out with co-host Diego. Thank you for taking this journey with me. On this episode of Let's Find Out, our guest has been seeking out the mysterious from a very early age, and his goal is to document the history, mythology, and tales of the peculiar creatures from around the world. You can check out all his fantastic videos on YouTube on the Fedora CRT channel, where he talks all things cryptid and mysterious. We will be covering all this plus more. Please welcome to Let's Find Out a great friend of the show who has some of the most amazing stories to share. Gregory Fedora. Gregory, my friend, welcome to Let's Find Out. Man, I'm super psyched to having you on tonight.
Dude, I'm happy to be here. We met at with a cryptid Halloween. You know, is great. Your stuff's cool. I enjoyed talking to you there, and then we talked about getting together to do this. I'm glad we finally got to do it.
You know? Absolutely, and you were going around earlier. You were filming a video, if I remember. I right before the doors were open, and you had that puppet with you, man.
He's right there. He's right there. Yeah, Snally. Saul the Snallygaster. He's hanging out behind me. He's chilling right now. He's watching you. And so, yeah.
No, he gave me some great words of encouragement for that night. It was my first real deal event that I've ever been a vendor to. So it's kind of a great icebreaker, my friend. So I really appreciate that.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, I had fun with that. Like he's been around. This is his second iteration. The first one I did, and it was one of those like a flamingo things that you have a trigger, and I broke it, and then I had someone actually make a puppet, and so now I have an actual real puppet as opposed to like one of those like little finger grabbing shark things. So, but so he comes around and says stupid things, and that's what he's good at. And I can get away with saying stupid things and be like, it's the puppet, not me. And it's funny how quickly people don't pay attention that I'm the one saying it. So,
no, well, the puppet and I have a lot in common then, talking things like that, a lot of nonsense. No, I kid, of course, but it's amazingly entertaining. I really appreciate you doing that night. It kind of, like I said, a great icebreaker, and it set a great mood for the night. I see when I run into a lot of folks, especially in the with the subjects that we cover or in that community, where a lot of them start at an early age with an interest in cryptids or UFO or paranormal.
Yeah.
Was this something that you had from an early age yourself, or is this something that down the road you became interested in, and just like me, you got hooked on it?
Well, when I was real little, back in the day, they used to have those like book fairs at the schools, and there was scholastic book fairs, and I just remember I would get like the books, and the books I was always like, drawn to were like, because I was into Star Wars. I was in that. So like UFO stuff, and then like monsters, but like it was always like just a book, and the book would have like Bigfoot, UFOs, Loch Ness, and that was pretty much it. It was like those were the three main ones. And so I'd heard, I mean, I thought Bigfoot and Loch Ness, they were always cool, and UFOs were always cool, but that was it. And then as I got older, um, I started finding out about all these other monsters people were saying they're seeing. I'm like, what? And the thing is, I grew up in Ohio, so I mean, there are plenty of Ohio monsters. Mothman's sort of like right on the border there, and you have like, I mean, he's more West Virginia's, but I mean, he was close to Ohio. But then you have like the Octoman, and then you have the Loveland frogs, and then you have Grassman, which is basically a Bigfoot. But as I got older, I was like learning about these others, but there weren't at that time. I was in the age where the internet was just starting to sprout up, so you didn't really have Google and all these things. I mean, you just had Alta Vista, but still, there wasn't like a lot of stuff out there about these monsters or even books like there are. But I was always drawn to like I wanted to see what these things look like. And then when you'd find stuff on it, it was just paper and people writing, and I'm very visual, and I like to see things. And so I was drawn to try and find out what these things were. And like my thought was like, well, if someone saw something, like I'm always the person that's like, at some point somebody saw something along the way, they didn't know what it was, and they described it. Was it really or was it their imagination? But it's still the stories there. They had to have encountered something. And I felt that way with like mythology and all these things. Like when people are talking about, uh, like Cyclops or this, or the Minotaur, someone dealt with something. Like, because I don't think people would just be afraid of something that somebody never saw or had to deal with. So
Right.
something was there. What it was, there's a story in Scotland. The thing's called the Wolvere or Wolvine or something. I'm probably mispronouncing it, but basically it was like a wolf man. And but unlike other stories, this guy was very kind, and he would leave food for people, do these things, and he was a very different kind of dog man, wolf man creature. He was like and as I studied, I was thinking about it, and he was kind of an outcast to society. And I go, there's those people who are born with those where they just grow hair. And I was like, what if that's what he was? And the only explanation they had was he was a wolf man, when in reality he could have had one of those deformities where you have, the hair everywhere and dog face boy. But so I'm one of these, I want to find out what it was. And there's a lot of different creatures out there that we're kind of forgetting about over time. And because like Bigfoot, he's got a lot of publicity, so does Loch Ness. Everybody talks about them, but like these other lesser known ones, people are kind of forgetting, like for like the Snallygaster. Um, I moved from Florida to Maryland, where my wife's from, and I moved literally right next to South Mountain, which is where the Snallygaster was supposed to have lived. And I lived here for like 4 years before I even heard a story about it. And then I was like, what is it? And then I started reading. I was like, this is crazy. And then the mythology around it and the folklore around the Snallygaster to me was so cool. And then what was hilarious was people who had lived all their lives in Maryland and actually lived near South Mountain had never even heard of it. And I was like, that is horribly sad that this is a great story that goes back to the 1700s. And it literally is a story that started before. Everyone always thinks the Jersey Devil's the oldest known like monster story from the colonial days. I mean, if you take away Bigfoot, because obviously the Native Americans had talked about Sasquatch and all that, but like take away him, everyone's always saying it's Jersey Devil, but in reality it was the Snallygaster by 5 years. There were stories about the Snallygaster that predate the Jersey Devil. And I was like, and Maryland was not embracing it. It slowly is now. Like you got Sarah with the Snallygaster Museum, who's really trying to promote it, and she's doing an amazing job, and she's everywhere now. And I mean, before I met her and other things, I had never heard of it. And I was like, that to me was sad that we're losing these different creatures, because every state has their own monster. And and we need to cherish them. We got to keep them going, whether or not they ever existed or not. They're part of the state's identity and the folklore of that area, and you don't want to lose that kind of stuff.
No, you don't. It's funny you mentioned earlier where the scholastic book fairs, right? Those are really
Yeah,
big, at least in my time, 70s and
yeah,
80s, and I guess in the 90s. This was in a library, and you mentioned the book. I can picture the book in my mind because that is the very same book that you were talking about. I picked up. That's how things got it started with me. Now, I mean,
hmm
when I was a young age, I had a lot of paranormal experiences, but something about that book. Do you remember what that book was? Because it had Loch Ness, it was UFOs and
Bigfoot.
Bigfoot. What
Yeah,
was that?
I don't know. I wish I still had it. I need if I can kind of even remember the cover. There's the UFOs there, and there's Loch Ness and Bigfoot all on the cover. And
Yeah,
they were like, and it was kind of a bluish color, if I recall. And but yeah, I remember it, and I loved that book. And then it's that was like I said, it's like back in the '80s, like early '80s, and then like it's been how many almost 40 some years. I don't know what I did with it. I wish I still had it because that thing was amazing. If I could find it.
I'm starting to think that maybe it was one of those things to where it's a once in a lifetime find
Yeah.
because you're one of about half a dozen people, and I've talked about this book before, but nobody seems to be able to find it on Google. Nobody remembers the name of it, but we can all picture the cover.
Yeah. Like is it the Mandela effect?
I'll buy that for $1 because
Yes.
But hey, on the plus side, it got us to the journey where we're at today. At least it planted that seed, right?
Oh yeah.
And picking up on something you said earlier, because we all know, and we talk about a lot about like, Bigfoot, UFOs, and Loch Ness, and other type of things. You mentioned something about the lesser known things. So
Yeah.
this is of something that I found very interesting because it's the first time I've heard of this. So one of your very interesting videos that you talked about on your channel, I think you released it about a year ago, but it really did get my attention, as I said, the Wizard of South Mountain. Judging from what I heard and probably for the descriptions people might have given of it, was he kind of like an Aleister Crowley type of guy back then, or were we just getting the wrong kind of hype? Hwho was
He,
this wizard?
his real name is Michael Zittel, and I think in the video I kept calling him Michael Zeidel, but it's Zittel, and there's actually it's really close to me. There's a town like a road. It's called Zeideltown, and or Zitteltown, and that's where his family lived. And his grave is actually probably about 30 minutes from me. But I always try to like it's kind of those like the winner kind of gets to tell the tale. And he died destitute. And there's a lady called Madeline Dahlgren who wrote about him a lot, and she hated him. So a lot of what we know about him comes from her book South Mountain Magic, and he was basically. I kind of think he wasn't a bad guy. He was a healer, and he did a lot of healing. He also performed hexes, but again, we think hexes in the form of doing something evil, whereas back then, like a hex could be something to protect you. They would what those stars are called hex stars that you see on the farms in Dutch territory, and it was to ward off like the snallygaster or the hex wolf or whatever. You're trying to keep evil spirits away, and you would use a hex to keep them away. And he would perform these hexes on people and give them potions to cure things. Um, Madeline Dahlgren thought he was into the dark arts, which again, he's dead now. He died in 1870 something, so it's hard to say. Was he good or bad? I know that one thing he believed or thought or taught, said that you don't do magic for money, and that if you did, it would come back on you. And then that was really where his life turned for the worse. Is he by trade he was a craftsman. He made shingles for houses, and he was like needed money, so he had this magic book. And the story behind it is kind of crazy. He said that it came from Israel, from the Holy Land, and that he got it, and it was in Spanish, and then he translated the Spanish to German, which was his native tongue, and then he decided he was going to take the German version and translate it to English and sell it. And there's a couple things in that story to me are kind of interesting. Just that he said it came from the Holy Land, but it was in Spanish, and I would have thought from the Holy Land it should be like Hebrew or Aramaic or Latin, but whatever. The other thing is interesting is like by all accounts, he didn't have really any kind of education. So how he knew how to translate from Spanish to German, that's another question we don't know. But anyway, so he did translate it. He sold the book. And from then, and that was in the early 1870s, he died, like, I think it was within 5-6 years of selling the book and completely penniless. And so he'd sold this book, but lost everything. And so it went back to his thing of don't do magic for money. And he did, and he lost everything. And so it's kind of a sad tale. But like I part of me wants to give him the benefit of the doubt and think that he was a good guy. But people were like, again, it depends where you read or find out about him. People were afraid of him because he was like kind of a wizard. And literally that's what they called him. They called him the Wizard of South Mountain. And so, I mean, to this day, like, you can go over like on South Mountain and there's a plaque about him. There's also, if you go into Boonesboro, the cemetery there, that's where he's buried. And, and I think there's only one copy that I know of his book, and that is in a museum in Boonesboro, Maryland, which is just on the other side of South Mountain for me. So I've not seen it yet because every time I try and find out when this museum is open, it's never open when I can get over there. So I gotta find out exactly when they're open and head in there because I'd love to take a picture of it and see it. And I doubt I could touch it. It's probably in a glass thing. But he's a very strange, interesting dude. I wish I could have met him to find out. Because I would like to know, was he good or bad? Or was he crazy? Or was he just a chill dude that was trying to be cool to his neighbors, I kind of hope that's what he was. I lean that way.
It's interesting that you mentioned because I was going to ask you, whatever happened to that book and the fact that that book was never in print or replicated at all. It was just that one copy. That was it.
Well, I mean, that's the weird thing. He supposedly, like you said, he translated it. Like, we don't know what happened to the original. Then he had the German version. Then he took the German version and he translated to English and he sold copies of it in English. We don't know where the German version went. And there's only one copy of the English version. And that time since, and you would think the crazy thing is the only reason they found it was a lady was cleaning out her grandmother's house, I believe, and found it in her house. And that's how they got the copy.
I was for sure you're going to say somebody found it at a yard sale for 25 cents.
Yeah.
And boom,
Yeah, exactly. I wish I could find a copy. I wish that they would take it and make copies of it. And I would love to. Supposedly, now, if you read the South Mountain Magic by Madeline Dahlgren, she at some point saw a copy of it and read it, and she wrote down copies of the spells in her book. And so, which to me again was really funny. She's very religious. She was extremely Catholic, which is nothing wrong with that. But she talks about being. That's the only reason I bring it up. She talks about being extremely. She actually built a Catholic church on South Mountain, and she said she abhorred the black arts, but not enough to not make copies of some of the spells to put in her book to sell. So, so it's like,
that's a risk you take. You don't want to write down things you don't know about. I think I might have to make my way up to that museum and check out.
Yeah.
That book is amazing. Like I said, it's the first time I've heard of this. So I'm already hooked in the story. I was hooked on the video. I watched it twice just to make sure it's stuck in my mind.
Yeah. Now, well, I mean, South Mountain's crazy. Yeah. There's so many stories on that mountain. Like besides him, like it's like if you research South Mountain, Maryland, it's like the things that supposedly happened there. Besides, there was a Civil War battle there. Like all these, but something's up with South Mountain that all these things occurred in and around it. So. I got to look in more. Maybe there's a ley line that I just haven't figured out yet.
Man, there's always a rabbit hole to jump into. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Great stuff. And now, so from the Wizard of South Mountain, we're going to move on to something that perhaps is better known, but it seems like maybe it's the subject has reappeared again. I first
Hmm.
heard about the Hat Man in the 90s, actually. It seems that people around the world have had experiences and have accounts of the Hat Man or whatever name they call him in their country, connected to experiences with sleep paralysis. What's the history of the Hat Man? And from what I understand, he seems pretty damn deadly. Are we talking about a demon, some sort of spirit, or what
Yeah.
is exactly the Hat Man?
See, that's interesting. I think it is some kind of demonic entity because no one has good experiences with it. And I've talked about this before. Like when people have these experiences with certain creatures, I do lean towards evil. Um, or was it I can't say the word malevolent creatures. So I don't know exactly what it is. I know like some people say sleep paralysis, it's like synopsis in your brain, but then it's like some people have woken up they're injured by these things. And I'm like, and if you're just sitting there and you can't move, you can't be really injuring yourself. Like I could get it like, oh, you scratch yourself, but like people are talking about they can't move and they wake up with scratches or like when it's done, they're scratched up and like, what is going on? Why is it doing it? The history like sleep paralysis goes back centuries. People talked about having it, and there like people thought witches were doing it, this and that. The Hat Man is very unique in that, I mean, he's kind of like you don't really see a face. You see the hat, you see the eyes occasionally, and he's just ominous. And the thing is, in folklore, there are quite a few different creatures that I've come across that have a very similar look to them. Down South America, there's quite a few that are like, and I'm not going to try and pronounce their names because I will butcher them, and then they'll come haunt me or something. But there's quite a few that they wear these hats and they're evil and they do horrible things, and you want to avoid them. And I don't know. I feel there's some kind of connection to that, as well as the sleep paralysis. What's going on? Why and why? Who they attack and why? I can't figure that out because it seems it almost random. But it probably isn't. There probably is something going on, and I think as I do, as people look in more, you're gonna see a lot of weird kind of like for me the folklore and stuff, there's a lot of connections. Like I said, down in South America, I think it's the poo. It begins with a P. I put it in. It's in one of my books, but it's the dude was like freaky, horrifying, and it is basically if you were alone, this thing would hunt you and haunt you, and oftentimes kill you. And there's a lot of times with the Hat Man thing. A lot of the episodes people talk about people who have had experiences don't live much longer soon after their initial experience. So, like unlike other sleep paralysis, like other people you can have sleep paralysis and it goes away, comes back, whatever. But like specifically with Hat Man, people who've seen it or had it, either they have a really horrifying end soon, or someone close to them, and it's almost like a banshee in a way. Like not necessarily you are going to be the one, but someone close to you is. But yeah, the stories I've read, it's all like I don't want to ever. I hope I never deal with him. I'd be happy not to.
Oh, you and I both. So I posed a question. Maybe it's unanswerable. So what's the deal with the hat? Not the one you're wearing, not the cap I'm wearing, but Hat Man. Why? What
Yeah,
is the significance? Is it the shape of the head that looks like a
it,
hat, or what is
it,
it?
it could be the shape, or he could be hiding something. Maybe it's like to like keep his like because like when you wear a hat and the shadow cast, it hides who you really are, and perhaps maybe you know who it like I said, like a demonic entity may not want you to see exactly what it looks like. Because a lot of times they say, like in those type of things, like exorcisms and stuff, when you know what it is, you gain a foothold against it. And like because then you can like fight against it because you know who or what it is. Whereas when it's wearing the hat, perhaps the shadow keeps you from knowing fully what or who it is. So I mean, as we say, we call it the Hat Man. Maybe it's like I said, maybe it's not a man at all. Like maybe it's a demon, and we get so fixated on the hat and the Hat Man, we're lost on what it is and who it is and how to prevent it,
Oh, I mean, that makes great sense to me because if you focus on one part, you're not really paying attention what it's actually maybe trying to do or identify, like you said. Because I know there are those that believe once you identify a spirit or a demon by name, you take control of the situation somehow.
Yeah.
But that's a good call on that. And speaking of talking about hiding, I'll say evidence. Let's talk about giants because you recently talked about
Oh
this
yeah.
on your video, and I'm a big fan of this subject. And in fact, it's something I came upon about 10 to 15 years ago. I listened to a presenter called L.A. Marzulli. You also have, Christian pastors like Billy Crone. You have authors like Denver Michaels. And it seems to be depending on what side of the aisle you're on. And it's interesting because I know now the Christian church, I'll say the church, I mean the Christian church, I can't speak for anybody else, is slowly but surely starting to pick up the subject to where it can be traced back to Genesis 6:8 and what came out of Genesis 6:8. In your opinion, and the reason before I go talk about hiding, because it seems like every time there's an archaeological, somebody comes across a set of bones that might be from a giant or something, a lot of these things just disappear. Nobody ever sees this evidence. In your opinion, what do you think these giants are? Who were they? Were they the Nephilim? Were they a hybrid of angels and humans, or another species of humans that perhaps died out somehow?
I think and this is like gonna sound like a cop-out answer, but I think it could be actually there could be different kinds and different some both. Like I think it could be, like I said, a race of people who were like just killed off. Like in my video, I talked about how like when we see something, like when a group finds another group that they just are different from them. And so in this case, the video I was talking about was like the red-haired giants of Nevada. They looked different from the rest of the people in that area. And so they got together and, killed them because to them, they were scary. They were bigger than them. They had red hair. They just didn't look like the rest of them. And so like when you get a group together that's afraid of something that doesn't look like them, it's like the pitchforks and kill them. Let's get rid of these things because they're not like us. So that you do also have like the Nephilim, like what were those? I don't know, but like we do have the things in the Bible talking about the sons of God seeing the daughters of men, and then they came and those were the heroes of old, and so they were some kind of group. Do we have were those in it? Like I do know that it's mentioned in I think also in Exodus when the Israelites came to the promised land the first time, and the spies went in, and I think 10 spies went in, 8 came out, and they're like, no, the Nephilim are there. So what were they, what did they see there that scared them? Like they were big giants. And then I guess Joshua and I think it was Caleb or Gideon or one of the two. I can't remember who, but they were like, no, we can do it. We can fight them. And no, they didn't. They had to wait another 80 years or something. But then again in the Bible it talks about Goliath, and he was pretty big dude. Again, described, and depending on your mathematics, anywhere from 8 to 10 feet, which isn't really like it's huge, but it's not unbelievably like. And that's where I fall in is like I think when we say giants, it's really big people. That I think there were people 8 to 10 feet tall like that people had to deal with, and they were scary. But like I said, over time, people started telling stories, and they turned into 50-foot tall guys. And I mean, maybe there was at one point, I don't know, but I haven't seen any evidence of that big of a dude. But like 8 to 10 feet to me, that's still a giant. That's a big. Like if I stand next to somebody 6, 7 feet tall, I feel like a midget. And are you allowed to say midget now? I don't know. Like
you're safe on this show.
Okay,
say what you want to say.
But you know what I'm saying? I feel like I feel tiny next to like a 7-foot tall dude, man. And I've been next to one, and I'm like, gosh, man, I'm 5'9", but still 7 feet. It seems huge, and you're like, especially if they're jacked. You're like, okay, this is scary. But like in Goliath had 3 other brothers, and and they're talked about, and they were big too. And so, like I said, who were they? What were they? It's hard to say. I think that some of them were just naturally big people. Others could have been, like I said, people in witchcraft giving themselves over to demonic entities and creating this hybrid, possibly. There's a lot of things out there we don't know and understand, and a lot of people just joke around about. And I do too, but I mean that they just or don't want to deal with it. And as far as like the evidence disappearing, I think it's a fear thing. And if like they find these giant skeletons, they're like, uh-oh, if that story was true, what else is true? And if the masses find out too much truth, it's harder to control. And so when people, so you kind of squash the truth so that, people aren't like questioning, like, oh, no, it's always been this way. The science says this, and this, and teachers say this, and archaeologists say this. It's on. But like when something goes against that, it seems to always get kind of, instead of being, well, this is interesting, different, we should find out more. It's like, oh no, that's somebody. It's a hoax. It's a hoax. They always go with hoax, and then stuff just disappears. And that seemed to be what happened with Nevada. Like a lot of stuff vanished. So,
and that's true, because unfortunately, in the things that we're involved with, the research we do, there are a lot of folks out there that are just hoaxing the crap out of things, and it kind of hurts the reputation of honest folks that are trying to do the work. But when you have people faking Bigfoot videos, you have people faking UFO videos, they do the work for the folks who are already hiding the evidence to begin with.
Yeah, by making it seem ridiculous.
Yeah. Absolutely. But no, always an interesting subject with giants. It's one of those things that, man,
you had that thing just recently in Miami. Like, we don't know what happened there. There's still, like, people talk about big gray looking dudes that were tall running through and then they were trying to say it was teenagers with sticks. But I mean, what was that? I mean, was that alien, demonic, or what? We don't, again, it's another thing we don't know. Yeah. Like,
no, and it's funny. I talked about this on a prior episode, and I've heard two sides of their theories or their opinions. And I borrowed some pictures from somebody on you really got to take a look close. But it's always funny though, very interesting that we have all this technology available to us, right?
Yeah,
and you can take photos from an airplane, from a helicopter. You have surveillance cameras, you have this and that, but every time there's a picture of what could be possibly something that's happening, damn it if it's not always blurry.
Yeah.
I don't know. Is there some sort of curse? Or there's some sort of there's some sort of radiation they omit that these cameras can't catch them?
Yeah, I don't know. I've heard theories on like Bigfoot that he's interdimensional, and so, which is why he's so elusive, that he can like kind of be there, then all of a sudden gone. And perhaps if he is on a different dimension, different plane, that maybe cameras can't get a good shot of him. Now this is going to go into a weird direction, but like if you saw the movie, the Sony one about Spider-Man, where they were, was it Across the Spider-Verse or Into the Spider-Verse? Like when all the different Spider-Men came to his world, they weren't from his world, so they would like do this like shake thing and like kind of not be in focus at times. And maybe there's something to that theory or idea, because they didn't just come up with that. That's a theory of like if you go interdimensionally, that you're on a different plane. So if these creatures are from another dimension, could they just weed our cameras and not be able to focus?
No, I'm sorry, I mean to interrupt you, but it might be a possibility that they might be able to bend light somehow or create some sort of distortion in the field, because if they're coming from one dimension to another, that I would assume that naturally there would be some sort of interference.
Could be, yeah. That's as good as like, because a lot of times when you see these pictures of these creatures, the foreground background is in focus. They're not, and things near them are in focus, and you would think either they're just hauling butt super fast, but it doesn't look like they are. because even like video of them, like you'll see video and they're still not clear. So I mean, I don't know.
And that's what I'm saying. It's almost like the curse every time somebody robs a bank.
Yeah,
Even the thief is kind of blurry, but
yeah.
it happens. Whatever. I'm trying to make light of the subject, but something that popped up earlier in our conversation, because we're talking about all these stories,
Hmm.
cryptids, and creatures. Let's talk about your books.
All right, yeah.
Not only do you write the books, but you also do the artwork, correct?
Yeah, yeah, I did all that. Like, cause I mean, that goes back to the Scholastic book. Like after that, because that had pictures in it, and as I got older, and I would be trying to find these books on different monsters and creatures, there would be a lot of words, which is fine, and and I enjoy reading them. But at the same time, I like to see what people said they were. So as I'm putting together right now, I have 4 books out for them. It's the Happy Little Monsters. It's the series, and it's volume 1, 2, 3, and number 4 just came out at the beginning of this year. And I also have a book. It's called this is the only one I have here because I don't have any. It's the Christmas book, but it's like the Creatures Are Stirring, a Christmas creepy collection. It's past Christmas, but maybe you want to get it next year. But and that's just all the Christmas monsters and ghost stories. But like it's basically a collection of different monsters, and I draw I didn't draw. I use Photoshop to create them. I go with what people said they look like, and I create it the way like the most people said they look like. Because obviously when you get different people kind of describe it differently, but I took like okay, 10 people described it this way, 3 people this way. I went with the 10, and so I recreated the monster. And in the books, I show how big it is compared to me, then where they're supposed to be located. Then each one just has a short synopsis, only about a paragraph about each one. And the idea was I didn't want it to be like the be all end all. I wanted it kind of whet your appetite where you'd read this and be like, that's really it. I want to find out more about that. So then you could go start researching yourself and find out more about these different monsters. And I went with Happy Little Monsters because of Bob Ross and his Happy Little Trees. And so I just like I'm in my mind, every forest had happy trees, so every forest has a happy monster. And so I kind of like that's where I got the name. And then I just sort of I'm working on actually right now volumes 5, 6, and 7. Right now I have about enough to do 10 volumes, and it will probably keep going. But originally I was going to do them all together as one book, but my wife was like, that will be a huge book and it would be super expensive and nobody could get it. And then in my mind, I was thinking, okay, 10, 11, 12-year-old me would love this book and want it. And what is the best way to do that? So I turned it into volumes, and I was like, I'm going to I have them as paperback or hardcover through Amazon. You can find them all on Amazon. And I tried to keep the paperback at about $15 and the hardback at 20 because I was thinking a kid between 10 to 12 could get $15 to, hey mom, dad, can we get this book for $15? Or even if you're above that, my age, you want a book for $15. That's hard to find. So I was like, I try to keep it where people could get it and get their hands on it. Cause I'm also one of these, I like to have stuff that I can flip through and look at as opposed to just going online and seeing it. I want to have it in my hand. So, but yeah, that's really how I started getting the book. I'm actually working on another book right now that I'm hoping to have done by April. And I can kind of tell you about it. I've kind of avoided Bigfoot for a long time because I've always said that he has the best publicity team and he's everywhere. But then a while back, I was watching a documentary on Jane Goodall and the gorillas over in Africa and how and I was watching it, and I mean, it was kind of a boring documentary just because it was just kept going. But she talked about them in a way that humanized the gorillas, and in my mind, it went to this whole other direction. And I was like, what if, like, I went to the Pacific Northwest, and not only did I find Bigfoot, but I found a group of Bigfoot Sasquatches all hanging out, and I slowly befriended them, and they let me live amongst them. And then not only that, they made me their leader. And so I started writing this book from that perspective. And so it's still in the process, and I'm doing the artwork for it. And it's to be humorous, but it's like I'm having a few people read it and that are big into Bigfoot, and so far they like it, even though they know it's not, not real at all. But I take what people have said about Bigfoot and people who research him, what they say these things do to interact, and I kind of took it, added that. But it's just, I'm still working on it. Hopefully it'll be done. But right now it's being called Sasquatch and Me. And that's what I'm working on right now. And we'll see. I'm hoping to have it done by April. I don't know if I will, but
I was going to ask you about the title. I didn't want to let the cat out of the bag, but
yeah, that was
as
it.
It may. I appreciate
Sasquatch and Me. You're the first person I've told about this.
I got the exclusive. I love it.
On the podcast. Like, I've talked to other people about it, but I've not talked about it saying that I am trying to get it done. So
excellent. I'm thrilled that you did it on my show. Now, for the listeners of Let's Find Out,
yes,
who want to know more about your YouTube channel, and of course you mentioned it earlier, where can they get the books? Where can they watch your videos?
Okay, well, they can go to, for the books, you can go on Amazon, and it's, Amazon.com. And if you just type in the Fedora files, it brings up all the books that I've done. For my channel, it's YouTube.com, and it's at the Fedora files. If you go to youtube.com, do at the Fedora files, or if you go just type in FedoraCRT.com, that will take you straight to, you can see the podcast there. And also you can get links to the YouTube channel and to my Instagram, which is also, let me tell you my Instagram, because I always forget. I always say the wrong thing. So I'm going to say it right for you.
Thanks.
It's G_Fedora_crypto. And if you go to that, from there, you can get to all of my things as well. You can get to my YouTube channel, and there's also a Facebook page, but I don't remember the name. I think it's either Fedora CRT or the Fedora files. But if you type in the Fedora files on Google, it'll bring up all these different things that are mine. So, and that's my podcast, the Fedora files. And I try and put it out once a week. Sometimes it's just 3 times a month. It just depends on what's going on in my life, but I try and keep it consistently on Wednesdays is when it comes out. So, and yeah, so I mean, that's where they want to check me out and look up stuff and check out the books. I'd love to hear what people think about them, and I'll be I'm trying to get to more events. I've been to a few, but like, just my schedule's crazy. But hopefully this year I'm gonna try and hit a few more. How many did I did 2 last year, which is sad. This year I'm gonna try and do 4. So I'm gonna eat, I don't want to overstate. Like, if I can get more than 4, I'll do it. But I'm aiming for doing 4 events this year, and then just slowly building up every year, adding more if I can.
Same thing with me, and my friend. That's where I met you last year, and I look forward to seeing you again this year. I'm going to add some more shows for me as well, and vendors, of course. And I look forward to your new book, and I really appreciate you taking the time to come on to Let's Find Out. You're a very busy man. You're writing books, you're putting the podcast, you're doing the videos. I really appreciate you coming on, my friend.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. I enjoy it, and hopefully you'll come on my show, or I can come back on yours, and maybe when I get this other book done, we can talk about it. I'll send it to you, and you can read it and tell me what you think.
Absolutely, my friend. This has been another excellent episode of Let's Find Out with co-host Diego. Please check us out on Spotify, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, on all our social media pages, as well as our YouTube, and we're also on Rumble. Like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for taking this journey with me. Until next time, my friends.
Who Said Apes Have No Tails? Is a collection of previously untold anecdotes from the filming of the original Planet of the Apes and 3 of its 4 sequels, as witnessed firsthand by Erlen Botelho Carbajal. She not only had roles in the films, but Erlin was also one of John Chambers' earliest models used in the creation of the groundbreaking, and subsequently Oscar-winning, ape prosthetics. For more information, please visit zombiemediapublishing.com. Who Said Apes Have No Tails? Available now. Copyright CoHostDiego. All content for Let's Find Out is the property of CoHostDiego and is served directly from our servers with no modification, redirects, or rehosting. All celebrity impersonators are paid performers. The impersonated celebrities do not endorse or promote any views or opinions expressed by our guests, CoHostDiego, or Let's Find Out. The information shared on Let's Find Out is provided on an as-is basis with no guarantees of completeness, accuracy, usefulness, or timeliness.